One, she smiled, tilted her head, and said, "You talk like a man who always gets what he wants." She had no idea. The only thing I wanted was her. The evening began like any other, quiet, unassuming, unplanned. I wasn't looking for anything that night. I just wanted a place to think, to breathe after another long day. The cafe was half empty, wrapped in that amber kind of light that softens everything it touches. The kind that makes strangers look familiar and memories feel close. That's when I noticed her. She sat by the window, a woman who carried herself with that rare kind of calm, the kind that doesn't ask for attention but draws it anyway. Mid-40s, maybe, though it didn't really matter. There was something timeless about her. She was reading, one hand around a cup of tea, the other absently turning pages as if her mind was somewhere else entirely. A few loose strands of hair brushed her cheek whenever the door opened and the wind slipped in. I didn't plan to talk to her. But life has a way of setting quiet traps like that. Small, invisible moments that change everything when you least expect it. When our eyes met, it wasn't dramatic. Just steady. A glance that lingered half a second longer than politeness required. I smiled instinctively. She didn't return it right away. She just looked at me, measured, thoughtful, like she was trying to decide if I meant it. Then, just barely, the corner of her lips curved. A few minutes later, I found myself near her table, asking if she was finished with the book she'd been reading. Half excuse, half invitation. She looked up, studying me like she could already see through every layer I'd ever tried to hide behind. "You talk," she said, her voice low and warm, "like a man who always gets what he wants." The words hung there, soft but cutting. The kind of line that could have been playful or probing. I didn't smile this time. I just met her gaze and said, "Not always. Just what I'm willing to wait for." That was the moment everything changed. She laughed. Quietly, almost to herself. It wasn't the laughter of someone amused. It was the laughter of someone surprised. Her eyes softened then, and for a brief second, the confident composure she wore like perfume slipped away. I saw something real, something gentle. The conversation that followed wasn't long, but it was enough. Small things, books, travel, the city we both pretended not to be tired of. But beneath it all, there was a current neither of us named. When I left that cafe, her voice stayed with me. That line, her line, replayed in my head long after the door closed behind me. "You talk like a man who always gets what he wants." And maybe that night, for the first time in a long while, I realized what I truly wanted. Might not be something I could just reach out and take. It might be something I'd have to earn. A week passed before I saw her again. It wasn't planned. It never is with people who linger in your thoughts the way she did. Quietly, insistently, like a melody you can't place but keep humming anyway. It was late afternoon when I stepped into the small bookshop on the corner of Whitmore Street. The kind of place that smells like dust and paper dreams. I came for a gift, or at least that's what I told myself. But the truth is, I walked in because the day felt heavy and I wanted to be somewhere quiet, somewhere that reminded me of that first night. And then I saw her, standing near the back, in front of a shelf of poetry, her coat draped over one arm, her hair pinned up loosely, a few strands escaping like they'd grown tired of being perfect. She hadn't noticed me yet. She was reading the back of a book, lips parted slightly as her eyes moved across the text. The same quiet focus I'd seen before. I almost didn't say anything. Part of me wanted to watch from a distance, to just exist in that moment without changing it. But then she turned, and our eyes met again. "Twice in one city," I said, smiling. "That's got to mean something." She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Maybe it just means we both read too much." Her tone was teasing, but her smile gave her away. She was glad to see me, not that she'd ever admit it out loud. We walked together through the aisles, talking about the kind of things that don't sound important until later. Favorite authors, forgotten music, the smell of rain before a storm. She told me she used to write once, before life got too busy. I told her I still tried, though half the time the words didn't come out right. She listened, really listened, her eyes flicking to my face between sentences. I noticed the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, the way her laugh seemed to settle the air instead of break it. There was no rush between us, no need to fill every silence. It was enough just to be there. When she reached for a book on the top shelf and I instinctively helped her, our hands brushed. It was nothing, a second at most, but something in her breath changed. Just slightly. "You always this helpful?" she asked, half smiling. "Only when it matters," I replied. Her laugh was soft this time, a little unguarded. Outside, the first hints of rain began to patter against the windows. She said she had to go, but not before glancing at me in that quiet, deliberate way again. "Maybe we'll run into each other a third time," she said. "Maybe," I answered. "Or maybe I'll stop pretending it's an accident." She didn't respond, just smiled, turned, and disappeared into the gray evening. And as the door closed behind her, I realized something had shifted. The first meeting was chance. This one felt like choice. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day that feels half asleep. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, and the whole city seemed wrapped in gray silence. I was sitting by the window of a small cafe, the same one where we first met, lost in thought, when the door opened and she walked in. No coincidence this time. She saw me almost immediately, and there it was again. That small, knowing smile that never said too much but always seemed to mean more than it should. She walked over, her heels soft against the wooden floor, and asked if she could join me. I nodded. For a while, we didn't say much. Just the clinking of cups, the low hum of rain against the glass. There was something unspoken sitting between us. Not heavy, just present. Like a shared secret neither of us had decided to name yet. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You ever feel like you've lived two different lives?" she asked, eyes on her cup. I looked at her, unsure how to answer. "All the time," I said. "The one people see, and the one you keep to yourself." She smiled faintly, not looking up. "Mine used to be full, loud, people everywhere. I thought that meant I was happy. Then one day I realized I couldn't hear myself anymore." Her voice was calm, but the space between her words carried a quiet ache. She told me about her marriage, not in detail, just enough for me to see the outlines. The years spent holding everything together, the slow drift that happens when love turns into duty. The way people can share a home but live in different worlds. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, the way she deserved to be listened to. When she finally looked up, her eyes softened. "You're quiet," she said. "Just trying to understand," I replied. "You don't owe me any of this." "I know," she said. "But for some reason, it feels easy to tell you." That line stayed with me. It feels easy to tell you. Because that's what real connection sounds like before either person admits it. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. She told me about the art she used to love, how she stopped painting when life got too loud. I told her about the dreams I hadn't said out loud in years. At one point, she laughed softly and reached across the table, brushing a raindrop from my sleeve. The touch was brief, but it felt like something unlocked in the silence that followed. When we finally stood to leave, she paused at the door, turning back just once. "You listen," she said quietly, "like you're trying to remember everything." I smiled. "Maybe I am." She didn't say anything more, just nodded, almost shyly, before stepping into the rain. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if the warmth I felt was from the coffee or from her. Started as a simple favor. She'd mentioned she was rearranging her apartment. New shelves, a few boxes that needed lifting, and I'd offered to help before I even thought about it. She hesitated at first, the way she always did when someone tried to get close. But after a long pause and a half smile, she said yes. When I showed up that Saturday afternoon, the door was already open, jazz playing softly in the background. The place looked exactly like her. Minimal but warm, sunlight pouring through tall windows, art leaning against walls as if waiting for her to decide where it belonged. "You didn't have to come," she said as I stepped in. "I wanted to," I answered, setting my jacket down. For a while, it was just the two of us working quietly. Her directing where things should go, me trying not to notice the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she concentrated. Every now and then our hands brushed as we passed each other in the small space. Small collisions that neither of us mentioned. At one point, she stood on a stool to hang a frame, and I moved closer, instinctively steadying her by the waist. She froze. So did I. It wasn't the touch itself, it was what came with it. That brief, charged stillness where everything else seemed to fade. The music, the light, the sound of the city outside. All that was left was her breath, soft and uneven, and the quiet pulse in my fingertips where they met her. She looked down at me then, eyes dark, unreadable. For a second, I thought she might say something, but instead, she just smiled faintly and murmured, "You can let go now." I did slowly. We went back to work, but the rhythm was different after that. The air carried a new kind of silence. Not awkward, not tense, just aware. Every movement felt deliberate. Every glance lingered a little too long. Later, when we sat down for a break, she poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've got good energy around you." "Good energy?" I asked, smiling. She nodded. "Some people fill a room with noise. You fill it with calm." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked at her, really looked at her, and she looked back, the kind of gaze that holds a question neither person is ready to ask. The light outside had started to fade by then. Shadows stretched across the floor, golden and quiet. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she said, almost under her breath, "You make it hard to keep things simple." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the look in her eyes told me I already knew. Something had shifted. I could feel it the next time I saw her. It was small things at first, slower replies to my messages, a tone in her voice that had grown careful. She still smiled when we talked, still laughed at the small things, but her eyes told a different story. They held that quiet, practiced distance of someone trying to keep from wanting too much. We met again at the cafe one evening. Same corner table, same soft lighting, same song humming low through the speakers. Only this time, she seemed somewhere else. Her hands stayed clasped around her cup, fingers unmoving, the way people hold on to something when they're trying to keep steady. "You've been quiet lately," I said. She looked up, gave a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just life. You know how it gets." I didn't press, but I didn't look away either. After a long pause, she exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "This, whatever it is, it's starting to feel dangerous." "Dangerous?" I echoed. She nodded slowly. "You're younger, full of possibility. And me, I've already lived through the parts you're just getting to. It's not supposed to look like this." Her words were calm, but there was pain beneath them, the kind that comes from trying to protect something by pushing it away. I leaned forward. "Who decided what it's supposed to look like?" Her eyes flickered, softening for just a second before she looked down again. "People talk. They always do. And I've spent too many years being careful." There it was, the truth she'd been holding in. The fear wasn't about me. It was about the world she'd already learned to navigate. The judgments, the whispers, the way a woman her age gets told what she should or shouldn't want. I wanted to tell her none of it mattered. That what I felt when I was around her wasn't confusion or infatuation. It was peace. But I could see she wasn't ready to hear that. Not yet. So instead, I said quietly, "If you need space, I'll understand. But don't mistake silence for indifference." She looked at me then, her expression breaking just slightly, the faintest tremor in her voice when she whispered, "You make it too easy to forget what I'm supposed to protect." When we stood to leave, She hesitated before saying goodbye. Her hand brushed mine, not out of affection this time, but as if she was reminding herself what she was walking away from. Outside, the night air was cool, the streetlights glinting off puddles from an earlier rain. I watched her walk away until she disappeared around the corner, her silhouette swallowed by the glow. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes, distance isn't rejection. It's fear dressed up as control. Weeks passed. Not many, just enough for the silence to start feeling heavy. Enough for me to realize how quickly someone's absence can become its own kind of presence. She'd gone quiet. No calls. No texts. The rhythm we'd built, the small, steady thread of connection, had simply unraveled. I told myself to respect it, to let her have the space she'd asked for. But every night, my thoughts circled back to the same place. That corner cafe, her voice, her smile, the way she'd said, dangerous, like it was both a warning and a memory. Then one evening, without planning it, I found myself walking the same path that passed near her apartment. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that carry both rain and reflection. And there she was, standing under the awning of a small bookstore, looking at the display window. For a few seconds, I just watched. She hadn't seen me yet. She was wearing a long beige coat, her hair loose this time, her posture calm but tired, as if she'd been carrying something she hadn't figured out how to set down. When she finally turned and noticed me, her eyes widened just slightly. Then she smiled, that same soft, uncertain smile that always disarmed me. "I was hoping you'd show up," she said quietly. I walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "I wasn't sure if I should." "Neither was I," she admitted. The silence between us stretched, not awkward but dense, full of everything we hadn't said. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady. She didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, she spoke. I tried to convince myself it was just curiosity, that it would fade. Her eyes met mine. But it didn't. I took a step closer. "Then why run from it?" She let out a soft laugh, the kind that hides more sorrow than humor. "Because it scares me. Because you make me forget how careful I've learned to be." I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. I just said, quietly, "You don't have to be careful with me." Her eyes searched mine. Steady, vulnerable, unsure. "You say that now," she whispered. "But one day you'll see me the way the world does. And I don't know if I can live through that again." I shook my head. "I don't care how the world sees you. I care how I see you." Something broke then. Not between us, but within the space we'd been guarding. She stepped forward and rested her hand against my chest, her touch trembling just slightly. "I missed this," she murmured. "I missed you." I covered her hand with mine, feeling her warmth through the rain-chilled air. "You don't have to say anything," I whispered. "I just needed to know you still felt it too." She nodded, eyes glistening, voice almost gone. I never stopped. And there, on a quiet street beneath the rain, we stood without words. Two people who had spent too long fighting what had already chosen them. We didn't plan to see each other again so soon. But life has its own way of arranging things once truth has been spoken. 2 days after the rain, she called, her voice steady but softer than I remembered. "Come by," she said simply. "There's something I want to show you." When I arrived, her apartment felt different. The jazz was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching in the dust that hung gently in the air. On the table sat a canvas, half-finished, streaks of gold, gray, and deep blue dancing together. "You started painting again," I said. She smiled faintly. "You reminded me what it felt like to want something just for myself." I didn't say anything. I just stood beside her, watching her hands move, slow, deliberate, graceful. There was something beautiful in the way she worked, like every brushstroke was a conversation she'd been meaning to have. After a while, She set the brush down and turned toward me. I don't know where this goes, she said. You and me. I don't even know if it should go anywhere. But I know that when you're here, the noise quiets down. And I haven't had that in a long time. I stepped closer, searching her eyes for hesitation. There was some, but it no longer scared me. I'm not asking for promises, I said softly. Just time. We can figure the rest out. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she reached up, brushing a streak of paint off her own cheek and laughing quietly at herself. I couldn't help smiling. That sound, small and honest, felt like sunlight breaking through a long storm. She reached out then, fingers grazing my hand before settling there, warm and certain. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a movie moment, just two people choosing presence over fear. We stood by the window as the light shifted, talking about little things. The smell of rain, her favorite books, the way the city always seemed both restless and familiar, felt easy again. At one point, she leaned her head against my shoulder. You know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You never told me what you wanted that first night, when I said you talk like a man who always gets what he wants. I smiled, remembering. Maybe I didn't know back then. And now? She asked, eyes still closed. Now, I said, I think I just want the moments that feel like this, real, unforced, and enough. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her hand tightened slightly around mine, her breath soft and steady against my shoulder. Outside, the sun began to dip, turning the room a shade of amber that made everything look infinite for a while. We didn't need to define it. We just needed to feel it. And in that quiet, golden light, we did, two people who'd stopped running from what was always meant to find them. We didn't plan to see each other again so soon. But life has its own way of arranging things once truth has been spoken. 2 days after the rain, she called, her voice steady but softer than I remembered. Come by, she said simply. There's something I want to show you. When I arrived, her apartment felt different. The jazz was gone, replaced by a quiet stillness that felt almost sacred. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching in the dust that hung gently in the air. On the table sat a canvas, half-finished, streaks of gold, gray, and deep blue dancing together. You started painting again, I said. She smiled faintly. You reminded me what it felt like to want something just for myself. I didn't say anything. I just stood beside her, watching her hands move, slow, deliberate, graceful. There was something beautiful in the way she worked, like every brushstroke was a conversation she'd been meaning to have. After a while, she set the brush down and turned toward me. I don't know where this goes, she said. You and me. I don't even know if it should go anywhere. But I know that when you're here, the noise quiets down. And I haven't had that in a long time. I stepped closer, searching her eyes for hesitation. There was some, but it no longer scared me. I'm not asking for promises, I said softly. Just time. We can figure the rest out. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she reached up, brushing a streak of paint off her own cheek and laughing quietly at herself. I couldn't help smiling. That sound, small and honest, felt like sunlight breaking through a long storm. She reached out then, fingers grazing my hand before settling there, warm and certain. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a movie moment, just two people choosing presence over fear. We stood by the window as the light shifted, talking about little things. The smell of rain, her favorite books, the way the city always seemed both restless and familiar, felt easy again. At one point, she leaned her head against my shoulder. You know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You never told me what you wanted that first night, when I said you talk like a man who always gets what he wants. I smiled, remembering. Maybe I didn't know back then. And now? She asked, eyes still closed. Now, I said, I think I just want the moments that feel like this, real, unforced, and enough. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her hand tightened slightly around mine, her breath soft and steady against my shoulder. Outside, the sun began to dip, turning the room a shade of amber that made everything look infinite for a while. We didn't need to define it. We just needed to feel it. And in that quiet, golden light, we did two people who'd stopped running from what was always meant to find them.